All right, welcome everybody to the Bethel Life Lab. This is our second installment. Bethel Life Labs are a partnership between Bethel Church and the work I do with Renewed Resources. Bethel Life Labs is a series of online interviews in the mental health field. We recognize as a church, and I recognize in the work that I do, that we're really in the midst of a mental health crisis right now in our country and really around the world. And our focus in the Bethel Life Labs is on the intersection between our spiritual life and our relational health and mental health. And again, particularly in terms of mental health, we're especially interested in things like anxiety, depression, and addiction. Now, our guest today is Sarah Brassard, author of Inside, A Guide to the Resources Within. And she's a 30-plus year spiritual teacher, trauma worker, and life coach. She runs an online community, a mastermind group, and group coaching that help women heal and grow through challenges and hardships in life. And she also hosts the Trauma Recovery Summit, which is how Sarah and I met. So Sarah, welcome. Glad you could be with us today.
Me too. Thank you, Mark.
So let's start by, if you would, just tell us a little bit about your work today, and then we're going to come back and talk about your past, sort of what brought you to that. But your work today as a trauma and spiritual coach, summit host, so that people have more of a sense of what you're doing in the world today.
Yes. That's a big question. And I think I'd like to start by saying the work that I do is really based around the work I am doing on myself. As somebody that has moved through trauma and really, I would say, successfully integrated it into my life, I am so hopeful as to what a consistent practice can do for us, that there is, in fact, this opportunity beyond trauma. I wouldn't have said that that was necessarily true 10 years ago, honestly. I was still very much affected in my day-to-day with managing the results of what trauma had brought to my life. And basically, my trauma was based around loss and abandonment. So I know you and I have discussed this childhood trauma, and how it impacts us as adults, and how in many cases, really maybe most cases, we blame ourselves for what happened to us at a very young age when we weren't in a position to figure out that it really wasn't us, that it was something that was happening to us. But because we didn't have the sophistication of our experience, we didn't know that. So we went out to make a better us. That's how I speak of it. Okay. And the better us is what as it might have served in the day, but no longer does. And so I've spent a lot of time in my life coming back to myself. And I hope that's what we talk a bit about today, because that's really sort of the basis of healing, I think.
Yeah, and we definitely will. That's going to be the focus. So once again, in terms of your sort of day-to-day life, you're running groups. I know you're offering a lot of teaching events that you run. And so and is it the case that you work mostly with women and you work mostly in groups, or do you do individual work as well?
Right. So I've my passion is really working with people one-on-one. I have just completed this extraordinary coaching certification, one that I took on after 30 years of coaching. And I realized that I took it on for myself because it started to dig into limiting beliefs. So this is what I'm saying, is that we have these different tiers of healing, don't we? And I would say one of the first tiers is really just learning a discipline of coming back, self-care, self-reflection, prayer, whatever that might be that brings you home each day is a practice. and practices are hard to put into place. That's really what my book is based on. And that's really what I teach people initially. But then as we get that in place, there's these nuances, there's this growth, there's this, wow, now that I've opened up this, look what's showing up. Now that I've opened up this, look what shows up. So I try to meet those needs through various programs that I offer. One of my programs is called Awaken the Healer Inside. And so that is a 9-month group coaching opportunity. And in that program, we're studying, there's modules, and soon I will actually have that course online so that can be a self-led course. But in the private work that I do right now with people, that's a whole nother sort of offering. Awaken the Healer is a in-person event. I also, have a community called the Tribe Inside. So I think what happens is we want to open up and have these conversations. We're having an experience, right, of healing. Things are starting to come up, and we can't necessarily talk to our partner about it. We can't necessarily talk to our kids, our friends, because they may not be on that same track. So I feel it's super important to allow a space, hold a space where people can talk about this and understand that others speak this same language. And isn't that fantastic?
Yeah, that's very cool. So I love what you're talking about here. Maybe this is a good time before we go further. You've hinted at it, but if you could, just a little bit about your background, your origin story, sort of what got you into this work. And also, just to clarify, you're in the Northeast, correct? And have you
Yes.
always lived there? So if you, a little bit about your background.
Yes, I live in New Hampshire and on Cape Cod. So I have the great honor of living in these two beautiful spots by the coast in New England. I have always lived in New England. My situation was that I'm one of 5 children, and we lived in a what I would say felt a very safe and comfortable environment as children. My father, unbeknownst to us, was dying of leukemia from a very young age. So after my youngest brother was born, my dad was diagnosed. He didn't live as though he were a dying man, but he was. And my father died when I was 16. But what happened was my mother did know. And so my mother, she found ways to support herself, and that took her from our home. So she ended up leaving for another man. And the devastation of that was profound, because not only did we not know our dad was on a track to die as a young person, the loss of her was even probably more significant, because she was really sort of the pillar of the family. And we all coped in different ways, right? I mean, as a family, you all cope in different ways. We clung on tightly to one another. But it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I think the best that I could do in that time, because I was stronger than I knew, was just to make it seem like this isn't happening. I'm not going to tell anyone at school. I'm going to just carry on. I have since asked my friends from childhood if they knew. They did not. And what this tells me at this stage of my life is what we do to survive. What we do to survive might keep us safe at some level, but becomes something that keeps us chained, imprisoned as we get older. And those habits sometimes are never recognized, right? And they are very difficult to unpack. So hence this discipline, or this need to reflect deeply on what delights us and what we suffer with, is really important.
So, thank you for sharing that, by the way. I mean, that's some powerful stuff. So, when did it, when do you feel like in adulthood that really there's some shifting that took place, right? I know for a lot of people, let's say with family of origin stuff, something really seems to hit them when they get married and have kids, and then their kids are a certain age, and that triggers memories or whatever. Or maybe it's just earlier, something, things just aren't working. How did it work for you? Like, when do you feel like there was a recognition and then some turnaround?
Yeah. Well, I was actively not trying to look like, excuse my language, a shit show. I was going to do anything in my power to make it look bright and shiny and polished. And while that might seem like, oh boy, she didn't, I think that imprisons us just as much as the opposite does, truthfully. And I'd like to say that to those out there in your audience, because sometimes we think it's just going to have to look like this, terrible and blown up. Well, nobody really knew, I didn't think, that I was suffering as deeply as I was. I got married. So I started a business at 21. I met my husband at 22. We married at 25. We had a baby at 26. Um, Life looked pretty darn good. We had a home. We were established. We had our second child. And then I started getting these physical symptoms. I had shingles when I was 27 years old. It showed up for me neurologically initially. And then it showed up in my heart and lungs. So I got bronchial pneumonia that would put me in bed for 3 weeks with young children. And when you can't take a breath, guess what? That's a wake-up call. And it was my wake-up call. Maybe it's not everyone's, but it was definitely mine. And at that point, I just knew that if I didn't recover from these wounds, if I didn't find a way to heal, that I might not most likely survive them.
Wow, yeah, that's powerful. Um, so why don't we just keep going then from the
Sure,
standpoint of biography? So
sure.
what were some of those turning points for you then? What were the learnings that sort of helped you, which obviously then are the things that you're taking into the coaching and teaching that you're doing now, and your book, which we'll get to as well. But
Well, it tracks pretty interestingly, right? So when I was 21 and I started my clothing business, I had this very successful women's clothing boutique. And it's fascinating to me now as I look back, because at that point in my life, I wasn't doing inner work. So I was still making things all shiny, put the clothes on, make this look great. This was all outside work that I was doing at that point in my life. When I had the turning point of health issues, I went into massage therapy school. I did a 2-year massage therapy program, worked with cadavers. It was a deep dive into the human body. And all of a sudden, I realized how disconnected that my energy left when the trauma happened. And I now, as a holistic healer, that's how I think. It's like, how do I get people back here physically? Because it's the only place and the only way that we're going to get them to heal themselves. So that was huge. And then from there, I went into something called Kundalini Yoga, which may or may not be something your audience knows about, but it's based around pranayama, so breathing techniques, physical movements that match with these breathing techniques, mantras. So it's a vibrational thing. It's really like this yoga for householders. And it's so profoundly complete that the physical aspects of what it did to me inspired such growth and learning. It was unbelievable. It's still my practice today.
mm,
Um, And then from there, I went in. So I had gone to Kundalini yoga with my teacher. She was the one that guided me to Kundalini yoga. And then she became an ordained minister in the interfaith um, religions. And this fascinated me because my dad was an Episcopal minister. So um, I went again to an extensive program and became an ordained minister. And that for me kind of rounded out this journey in my offerings and my own healing. And as I don't know if we said it before when we were talking, Mark, but it's what I teach is really based around what I too am learning and growing into every single day.
Yeah. Thank you. Boy, there's so much that I'd like to unpack in that. Yeah, that's some powerful stuff. I was reminded, I'm sure you're familiar with this book and this author, Bessel van der Kolk, who's
Oh,
one of the
yes.
leaders in trauma and trauma recovery. He's written some books, but one of his books, the title is "The Body Keeps the Score,"
Oh, yeah.
and just that idea of how our trauma is part of our becomes part of our biology. What did someone say? Our biography becomes our biology.
Yes.
And so anyway, again, as you well know, all the work you do, and then the Trauma Recovery Summit. But I want to just bring this point up, particularly for the listeners that are part of our church. I'm just going to make an observation that so for all of the great power and beauty and great wisdom in Christian teaching, one of the things that I feel like at least contemporary Christian teaching does not emphasize enough is our embodied existence. As we are human beings in flesh with bodies, with our for a lot of us, we just simply think of our body as this empty shell and this problem, this source of temptations and struggles. But the reality is, this is where we live, and the things that happen in our lives, they play out in our body, in our physiology, and so yeah, that's super powerful. Then how uh, one of the ways, or a significant part of the way that healing comes, is helping us get in touch with how our inner struggles create problems in our physical life. Um, anyway, I have more thoughts about the yoga thing, but just anything you'd say about that just that sort of embodied nature. And again, if you've had interfaith study, I would imagine you would have noticed that as a kind of maybe a difference of Christianity being a little bit more cerebral and maybe less bodily focused than some of the other traditions. And I don't think that's necessarily true with ancient Christianity, with original, but certainly like Western sort of post-Enlightenment Christianity. Anyway, I'm rambling. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, no, no. I think so your question was
Well,
that.
just any of your thoughts about this, the body connection
Gotcha.
with our trauma and the body connection to healing.
Yes, yes. Well, I'll tell you about an experience I had when I first started yoga. When I had first gone to yoga, I remember leaving after doing extensive pranayama. So these particular ways of breathing, the simplest being taking a long, deep breath and inhaling and expanding the navel center to receive the breath, and then exhaling and allowing the belly to move towards the spine. Just that concept is foreign to most people because the opposite happens because we are so often in a state of fight and flight where imagine, if you're scared, you suck in your breath, right? And so we are breathing the wrong way, just that simple thing. So when I learned in class on that particular day, this way of breathing, what happened for me is that I felt nauseous. I felt lightheaded. It was like my body was like, whoa, what is going on here? And you would think, right, that who wants to feel nauseous and sick when they leave something that's supposed to be good for you, like yoga? And this is where I knew it was the intuition of my body, because I knew I had to continue on. I knew that even though I was having this kind of response, that there was something there for me, that it was going to heal me. So what I did was to speak to my teacher and say, this is my experience. And she said, my recommendation is put warmth or ice, depending on what feels better, after class, and just rest and just let it be. And sure enough, that was all I had to do. And I didn't have to do it that long. My point being here is, don't give up. If you have one of these responses, your body is waking up to this experience. And if it calls to you, stay with it. Because I always say to my clients and to my students, the body is the truth teller. The body doesn't lie. And so when we can drop into this incredible knowledge of the body and ask, you know, we have this guiding force that is so profoundly accurate that I don't know, we can find a lot of trust in that.
Yeah, so we were talking before we started the recording about the connection with yoga, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to make a comment here because in my role as a pastor here, I remember a conversation that I had with someone who had just real concern about yoga from a Christian perspective, that they associated yoga with a particular Eastern religion, and that it was sort of not compatible with Christian teaching. And so I have a different view. And in fact, I was really introduced to yoga some years ago when the church I was a pastor at, we rented our facility, our church, to different organizations, and one of the people we rented to was a woman from a Catholic church in our community who ran a yoga studio, and so we wound up having quite a number of conversations, and became friends. She and Charlene were good friends, and we still are friends to this day. And I kind of did then a deep dive into what she was doing and what the teaching that she was offering, and then how that related to Christian teaching. And I was I'll just say this: there's with a variety of practices, there are different mindsets that you can take into it. There are certain religious overlays you can put on it, but I believe there's just wisdom in the yoga tradition that I think is helpful, and in some ways relates to certain aspects of Christian teaching, meditation, particularly Christian meditation. But anyway, I wanted to bring this up and then get your response to it. So in the study that I did, I came across a woman. Her name is Sean Korn from New York, and she told the story of how I think this was actually in an interview on I don't know, some podcast where a young woman, as a young woman, she had been sexually abused, and or I don't know if even abused, but just had a lot of sexual trauma in her life. And so she's like in her 20s going to yoga classes, and part of it is, you're relaxing, and you're just letting yourself sort of settle right into your body, and in the context of doing that, all of a sudden a bunch of stuff came up for her that began a big healing journey for her. And again, for me, as I read that story, and then I don't know, just the reflecting that I've done, is that there's something to this, that when we quiet ourselves and reconnect to our bodies, um, sometimes what'll happen then is memories will come up, or experiences come up that we can find healing from. I don't know. So that's your experience, I'm going to assume.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And, just addressing, you were speaking about a certain person that had come up with concerns around yoga. And the way I feel about that is, um, I get it. I get it because I think things that are not familiar to us and different ways of being and looking that are not familiar to us can pull up a lot of fear. And I know, as I said to you earlier, Mark, when I started with Kundalini Yoga, we had this teacher training in an ashram outside of Boston. And again, I knew that this was something that I was going to do. I was being called to do this, but I'd be less than honest to say that I wasn't particularly comfortable initially. And the greatest gift that training did for me was broke down walls of judgment and restrictive ways of thinking.
Mm.
And I am telling you, everybody deserves their opinion, and I'm surely not saying that that's not fair, for them to think that way. I'm just saying I get it because
Mhm.
I was feeling that way too. And the best we can do is try to break down those walls that
Yeah.
want to judge anything truthfully,
Yeah.
and this practice saved my life.
Mm.
It saved
Yeah.
my life because, what are the statistics, Mark? I mean, people that have extraordinary trauma, people that have trauma have such a higher rate of life expense of dying, life expectancy. Yeah, than others. I mean, I've heard this. I talked to 41 experts, luminaries, practitioners last year with this trauma recovery summit, and they were like, it's profound. People that do not recover from trauma, they die earlier than others. And I would have been one of those people.
Yep. Yep.
So, who is to judge what it is that we do to heal our precious lives?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so let's get to that trauma recovery summit then. And again, this relates to your work. So it's gonna be like a twofold question. So, because we want to get to the point of in this interview to say, okay, what would we recommend that a person do? Okay, so this is not specifically a yoga promoting group or yoga promoting interview. There may be a part of that is a good next step, but so for someone who's got the trauma in their lives, we want to be talking about now what should they do. So the yoga class for you, the things emerged or things sort of came up, and then you started to work through them. So what did you do to work through them? And then that relates then to this trauma recovery summit that you've recently conducted. What are the things, some of the kind of important gleanings that you had from that again, someone who's watching this and realizes they've got stuff that's broiling under the surface. What would you recommend that they do?
Well, I would have to say that one of the most important parts of my healing was recognizing how unwell I was. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's how deep is your suffering? And are you willing to suffer at that level for the rest of your life? Does that feel bearable? And what I often say, what's screaming the loudest? Is it your emotions? Is it your physical body? Is it your spiritual life? Where are you yearning for some relief? And listen, it really is as simple as that. And I think if we can just come to a place of saying, I'm deserving of healing, I deserve this, that somehow these things show up. For me, it wasn't just yoga. It was my, massage therapy program. It was, um, going and doing this work and teaching and interacting and actually learning how to create a discipline of self-care that turned everything around. And we know that that can be multifaceted, right? I mean, for some, it's walks in nature. For others, it's singing, dancing, meditating, praying. I mean, my gosh, you can do that in so many ways. But number one, we have to know that there's something that's deeply dissatisfactory, something that is creating an extraordinary amount of suffering in our life, and that we are deserving of that healing.
Thank you. That's very well said. And yeah, that's just a good thing to sit with, is just to recognize that the the recognition, which if I feel like I talk about a lot when I give talks or interviews or whatever, but the just the recognition that the pull of the society that we are living in today is a very strong pull towards ill health. If you go with the flow, um, it's going to leave you fat, sick, depressed, anxious, and addicted. That's that's the, so in other words, if you don't want to end up there, you've got to do some very deliberate things. And you talked about, making a clear priority for your own self-care and well-being. What does that look like for you these days?
Well, I'm just in another level of, oh my God, here's a whole new place that I'm moving towards. And that is, this sort of unapologetically me. It's this understanding that, I love talking to you about God because God is a huge part of my life. So it's this conversation with God that says, Sarah, the only way you can serve, profoundly serve, is if you are uniquely you. If you are dropped into your originality and your uniqueness, that part of you that no one can ever duplicate. I'm on this earth to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what these traumas do to us, is they keep us from that, right? They overshadow these gifts, these beautiful gifts that we have. And I'm kind of in this place right now where it's just like, wow, this is fabulous and scary all at the same time.
Yeah.
But I did a talk last night to my community called The Inconvenient Truth. And it's that whole idea of, I don't have any other choice right now but to be authentically me, because that is where I am. Does it mean that the rest of my life wasn't true? No, because I hadn't had that reveal. I hadn't had that conversation with God, if you will. But once you do, ignoring it has a lot of ramifications.
Yeah. All right. So I have a question now that is, it's a little bit selfish. I'm just personally curious.
Yeah.
So you have been an expert in trauma, a practitioner of various healing modalities. You wrote a book about this, and then you ran the Trauma Recovery Summit. And so you kind of, did a massive deep dive. Through that experience, what were the things that really struck you? Or, again, this is a 3-day event, 41 different, as you said, practitioners and writers and stuff. And so what were the things that were really reinforced for you about how trauma can be healed, and then what, if any, were some new insights that you took away from that, from that thing, from that event.
Well, I just want to speak to being called an expert on trauma, because I feel like I'm an expert on trauma because I'm healing through my trauma, not even because of my education and all of that. It's just that I am actively working with that aspect of myself and holding it and loving it and understanding it. So I just want to be really specific because I think all of us are experts in different ways. And that's by just living our life. My conversation with you was one of those like mind blowers for me, because you and I talked about that young us that didn't have the sophisticated understanding that we weren't to blame and how we just very naturally take the blame on because we don't know any better. My dad's not coming home because he's drinking. We don't think like that. We think my dad's not coming home because he doesn't love me enough to come home.
Right.
That for me was like, whoa, wow, okay. And it makes me want to cry, truthfully. So I would say your conversation, and you and I have done a few things since, and I have such respect for you, Mark. I have such respect for you, and I always enjoy our time together. There was another thing that was said that was also because I'm from one of five children. I have often, and I'm close to my siblings, I often have looked back to get a clearer view of what went on when we were kids. And don't you remember this? And inevitably they come back with, no, that didn't happen. No, it was nothing like that. And in talking to one of the therapists, she said, the thing about that is everybody's perspective needs to be honored. Do not let another, even in the same family, person's view or perspective diminish yours. You deserve that memory. If that's your memory, that's your memory. So that was another one that I just thought was like, wow, this, and so many more. But I would say those two conversations were right on top for me.
Yeah, cool. Um, this issue about, sort of being an expert on trauma because you've lived it. I'm trying to remember the exact wording of a quote, but someone said, if you're going on a journey, um, talk to someone who's taken the journey, not just someone who has heard about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I certainly feel that way as a, in the Christian teacher mode, and spiritual teacher, that um, there are some people that they're good students. They've read books, and they can, they're educated in a certain way about something, and they can help you in a certain way. But boy, there's a difference between what that person can offer versus what someone who has the learning but also the experience and has taken the journey. Yeah, that's powerful. So yeah, I know that about you, and certainly see that coming out in this interview as well, that what you offer is not simply, it is the education of wide reading and study and interaction with a lot of other experts, but it's also it's a journey you're playing out, or that's being played out in your own life. So what do you think? So if, let's say you're working, there's 10 women that come to you, and and five of them are really doing well, five of them are not, five of them just aren't getting it. What's why? What is it that keeps people from making progress? That What are you seeing that's sort of like getting in the way of people, finding healing, or people making progress?
Well, because I run group coaching programs, I will witness that often, but I can never overlook the fact that they're paying a lot of money and their so resources and also time and energy. And who am I to judge why anybody comes to this work? And as long as, you know, after we've done an initial discovery call, I feel that this that they're self-regulating, right? So I'm a coach, I'm not a therapist. And, you know, the big thing there for me is this person able to make dinner for their family? Are they getting out of bed? Are they living their life and they're really just looking for refinement? They're looking for deeper understandings about how to move forward. As long as I can establish that, then they're welcome in my programs. There is a clause that says if I see that that goes differently, then the recommendation is that they have to move on to a therapist.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yes. So I just to keep people safe and to keep my group safe, honestly.
Yeah.
But I would just say, Mark, who am I to say whether someone is doing good or not doing good? I am never there. I am oftentimes in teacher mode in group coaching settings, but as a coach, I'm always trying to inspire them to have these answers themselves. They're not necessarily coming from me. I'm just very skilled at asking questions that are bringing up thoughts for them that they may have not considered and reading back information to them that they may not be hearing themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh boy, that's the perennial challenge for me in running coaching groups. It's such my tendency to want to teach.
Yeah.
And it is true. The power of it comes when you're able to elicit the insights and understanding that people, that I believe God is teaching people and they need to get clear. So yeah.
One of the things is I'm just going to pop this thing because it may be helpful to your audience is because I told you I'm in this certification program right now, and one of the things that our instructors have told us and tell us over and over again, and I'm so appreciative of it, is as a coach, we are not there to heal them. We are there to help them feel.
Mm.
And that is such an incredible thing because it's just this, how do we connect them more deeply to themselves? How do we help that? Because we can't heal them. That's not our job. That's not something we're able to do.
Yeah, that's powerful. And so your job is to help them feel, FEEL, to get connected to what's going on internally for them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that really resonates with me. We talk about that in our church setting, in in this context, that it's not our job to heal or convince people of anyone. We believe that's God's job. Um, our job is to love and to be honest, to be open, to tell the truth, and then believe that good things will happen as a result of that. There's some author, like a self-help guy, I forget his name, who said that I'm not in the convincing business.
Mm.
I'm just in the honesty business, and I'm guess that's kind of what I'm hearing you say as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're near the end here. I'm going to ask how people can hear from you or can learn more from you, but is there anything that I haven't asked, anything that you'd like to add as far as sort of encouragements or next steps if there are people that are watching who are feeling like things aren't going well in my life right now. Maybe I've got some trauma that I haven't dealt with, whatever. What would you say, kind of some final, what your kind of parting thoughts would be? And then also if you would share how we can connect with you more.
Well, what I'd like to say to those of you that have any level of dissatisfaction in your life, there is no question too small, no event not worth looking into. That if there is dissatisfaction in any part of your life, have some curiosity around it. You're worth that. And as one of my teachers in Kundalini Yoga said to me, she said, where do you start? You just start. You just start. So what does starting look like in your life? And if you can't figure that out, look to somebody that you see doing something you are respectful of. You know, these people, we oftentimes look at people that are doing things that we wish we were doing as threats. We have jealousy. What if we looked at those people as just holding this space for us until we're ready to get there? That they're in fact showing us where we can go. I think that is a really beautiful sort of twist that brings us stronger and empowers us rather than taking us down. You can do it. You're worth it. Take up space. Take up space.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so sarahbrassard.com, is that the best way to reach you? And that's
That's right.
Brassad.
Brassard,
Oh, I forgot
Brassard.
the R. Brassard.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Brassard.com. Yep, my name.
All right. And then your book is, what's the title of your book again?
Inside, a guide to the resources within.
And that's available on Amazon. And
Yep.
yeah, it's good stuff. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Appreciate you being here and your insights and your openness. Have a
Thank you,
great day.
Mark. Oh, it's great to be with you.